Hi, everybody. Diana here at Build a Quilt. Welcome in and welcome to our January 2026 Skill Builder block. And this month, we're talking about the idea of how, excuse me, our segments shape our quilts, especially with Build a Quilt, because with Build a Quilt, we can't technically do a flip and stitch type circle, but we can still get the idea of roundness or curve depending on the segment that we use. And we're going to talk about that specifically in this month's particular block. And if you are part of the Quilt Lab channel membership, later in the month on the 20th, there's going to be a project that's exclusively for you guys made from this block, and you're really going to see how the shaping takes place. But I thought we would start by walking through some of our basic segments and how they can help shape and define what we're creating, okay? Because a lot of times we see something like a square and it's just a square. It just fills a space. A lot of times a background of a space or the center of another shape. So they don't always help to shape things all that much, but they can. If you're making an Irish chain quilt, you got to have your square, and that helps to shape your chain. So even something like a square can. So I thought we'd go through the segments and talk about them for a little bit. And then I have some examples about how different segments have shaped or changed. I've got two blocks that are technically both stars, but different. And we're going to talk about those because the reason that they're different is because different segments shape them different. So let's go ahead and move under the camera here. So there was our square. And like I said, a square is a square, but it helps. I don't like to think of a square so much as something that shapes, but as kind of really a foundationary block to build around a lot of times, or something if I need to fill in a background. So not a lot in that one, but let's talk about our most common, most often used segment piece, the half square triangle. It's a great segment for shaping. Why? Because the thing about blocks or segments that shape well is they have the ability to use more than one fabric in them. And that's exactly, this is the most simple one, the half square triangle. You can use two completely different fabrics. They could be two fabrics in the same color family, or two things that are completely different. But depending on how you put this, and you'll see this in some of our blocks, that's what can create a little bit of a curve. In fact, let me grab, this is our 16th block in our 24 block challenge that just came out yesterday. But as you can see, we have the 4 half square triangles here in the corner. And because of how we placed them with their fabric, it gives this piece the idea of rotation, of roundness, of curve. It's not just a square, right? Just a square block. It is overall a square block, but when you put this in a larger quilt, you see this curved image more than you think of a square image. So that's something that your half square triangle can do for you quite easily. And because we use it a lot in quilts, it's one of the reasons I think that there are literally hundreds of quilts out there that are made only with that block, because it is a true workhorse in our quilting life, in our patchwork. So the split rail is kind of the same way in that it has two halves. You can use two different fabrics in it, which is going to allow you to do some different shaping as well. And I have another block to show you, which is also from our 24 block challenge. And it's got both the half square triangles and the split rail in them. Let's take a look at this one. So you can see again, we've had our half square triangles giving us that curved shape. But here with our split rail, the same color that helps make the curve here in the split rail, it actually creates the background. And the other part of the split rail helps to create even a more rounded image in the center, more of that rosebud look, which this is a rosebud pattern. So it can easily help you define, I guess that's the best word, define the area of your quilt and what you want your block or your quilt to look like. So that's one more. Let's hang this one up. Now let's move on to our friend, the little flying geese unit. A lot of times we see flying geese units just layered up, all the same color or a few different colors. And what flying geese units are really great for is they give direction, very, very specific direction in a quilt because of that point, because the geese makes that little point. Here's another block from our 24 block challenge, and you can see all these flying geese. We don't really have any definition of curve in this one, but we certainly have direction. Look that way, look that way, look that way. I'm pointing you to something. The block on either side could be completely different, but this block guides your eye to those four corners or the cardinal points in our quilt block. So that is with our flying geese. Now the flying geese has something else about it that I want to share with you, and that is that you can truly do 3 fabrics in this one. So our other 2 that we've looked at have been 2 fabrics, but you can really do 3 here because you've got the goose and the 2 wings. Each one of these pieces of fabric could be completely different fabrics. That could help give you different kind of shaping within your quilt block. So this one is, I think this one is a valuable piece for sure. Now, there are 2 blocks that I think are truly, if we're talking about those basic 6 segments that we have in our library, the 2 that will allow you to have the most freedom in shaping your quilt, moving your color around, are these 2. Diamond in a square and the quarter square triangle. Why? The quarter square triangle gives you the opportunity to use up to 4 fabrics. The diamond in a square gives you the opportunity to use up to 5 fabrics because you've got these 4 flippy corners and the center. And here you've got the 4 triangles within the quarter square triangle. So these are super, super helpful blocks. In fact, let's take a look at, well, this one, let's go back to our flying geese unit just a moment. I told you about using separate, I forgot to show you this little sample. These 2 pieces here are flying geese segments, but look, the wings on each one are different colors. We've got 2 of the same greens, and then these 2 colors match these 2 colors in this half square triangle. So we're using these 2 wings to create the rest of our rosebud or our flower on this basket block. And the other 2 wings of our flying geese units are being used to create what we would call stylistically the leaves of this flower. And then we've got, of course, we've got the rest of the basket and stuff like that. Again, down here, we've used half square triangles to help create the base of the basket. So how those got used and how we place the colors really, really helped to structure and shape this particular block. It's so important to understand and play with these when you're making blocks, or especially if you're trying to design your own blocks, or when you're thinking about how you want to put finished blocks within a fuller quilt. So that one really kind of is the sample I want to show you with the flying geese unit. Let's set this one over here. Okay. Now, with these 2, I want to show you, actually, one of them is more of the flying geese unit, and one of them is definitely has to do with this one. So I want to show you this one, this star. Do you guys know what star that is? I bet you do. If you do, put it in the comments. It is, of course, a common 8-point star. Very standard, very simple, very traditional block. The cool thing about this is that the star points are all created with a flying geese unit. So in this particular one, we only made 2 colors here. And so all the points are the same fabric, but you could make these different colors for sure. And so this star, very traditionally shaped, kind of that starburst kind of a look to it. And that is because we use the flying geese to create the star points. The other great thing about this particular block is here in the center, you can add different segments. If I added my diamond in a square, let's say it was bigger here, I could make this center this color and make my flippy corners in this color, and it would reshape what that center of my star looked like. It would take it from a basic star to a much more involved star, and it would be simply gorgeous. Of course, your piece would need to be whatever size you're doing. This is a 5 by 5, so my diamond in a square would need to be a 5 by 5. But as you can see, when you have the ability within a block to make something in the center that is a square, try using some of your other shapes because it can really shape and change how that block looks and how it works within your quilt. Okay, now in regard to the quarter square triangle, what does that have to do with a star, you might think? Well, this is the very first block we did in our 24 block challenge. It is also an 8-point star, but look, they're so different. You wouldn't look at those and go, oh, those are the same. Oh, those aren't the same. They're not made the same because the standard one was made with the flying geese. This one, how we created our star points was by using a quarter square triangle. So in this scenario, let's look at this one. It's easier. The colors are easier to see. In this one, half of the quarter square is made with a piece of fabric that is part of the star point. This piece on all 4 of them was the background that allowed us to define those points. If this was another, if these were all different, just different fabrics, you wouldn't see a defined star here. But because we made these 4 as separate, as a background color, all the same fabric, it is a very defined star. And then the other half were just 2 different fabrics on each one. And it creates this lovely, lovely scrappy patchwork star. 8-point star, just like this one, but completely different. Now, we even used a quarter square triangle in the center here, but you could use our friend the diamond in a square. Can see how that would look by maybe taking on your flippy corners and using these 4 colors that are at the interior here, placing them in here. That would guide your eye outward into the color again and outward into those star points. So you can make stars a lot of different ways, and depending on the segments you use, you're going to shape them different and come up with a completely different look. And either way you do it, these are both beautiful pieces. But the nice thing is, the thing I want you to know this month is that with just the 6 basic segments, you have so much choice when it comes to putting your pieces together and creating your own blocks and your own quilts. Now, there is one more piece I want to show you, and it kind of leads us into this month's Skill Builder block. And this one is I just kind of call it a starburst. I love this block. One, I love this fabric. It was just a fat quarter I had in my stash. This is just a really light, soft, minty blue that matches this little bit of blue here in the larger daisies. But I love this. Now, how did I create this shape with Build a Quilt? Because you're not flipping and and doing our standard stitch and flip to do something that is shaped like this, how did I create that? Well, one, I had to use our very simplest block to help give me a base. That was our 4 squares. But here's the piece, and a square in the center. But here is the piece. I'm going to kind of fold this so you can see this a little better. Here is the piece I want you to really look at. This piece right here. This is kind of like our flying geese unit, where it's got a main body and it's got the 2 sides on it, but it's much more steep. So unlike the flying geese unit, which is kind of a flatter, shorter little piece, this can be made into a full square. See, a flying geese unit, you need 2 of those together to make this a square. Otherwise, it is a rectangle. This particular piece is actually a single piece. And together, by making these outer pieces, or what would be the wings, I guess, or the secondary peaks, because I like to think of this as a pyramid with the peaks on the side, by using the same fabric as I used in this square, it allowed me to shape this piece right here. And by keeping the colors the same in the center, that goes across both ways. There's no interruption. You could, as we've been talking about, use a different piece in there. It would make this look different. The idea of this block was to create something that was very much like a fanciful X or a starburst piece coming out. So I could use this in an X and O quilt, a Hugs and Kisses quilt. I could use this as my X if I wanted to. But by using that little piece right there in my 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, it allowed me to shape this block. And these kinds of pieces are so very important in our quilting to help us really get other types of shapes, like this kind of a wedged shape. And that leads us to this month's block. Let me bring us back over to our main camera for a little bit. So I hope you're catching on. Listen, if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments. I'll give you my email at the end. You can drop me an email if you like. I'm more than happy to answer questions. This is a video I wanted to make for you guys for a very long time, because a lot of times I get questions from you guys about, how did you create that shape? How did that work? And it's so simple, you guys, as long as you have the structure to do it, this segment to structure it how you want. So let me show you this month's block. I call it the Hygge Friend Heart. And you can see it's a heart, and it has a sweet little friendship star right in the center. Or if you're from Mississippi, I know you guys chose this as your Mississippi star, because Mississippi is the friend state. I love that. But this is shaped, and this one gives you a very rounded curve shape, which you cannot technically get using a circular piece of fabric in Build A Quilt, because round pieces and curved pieces don't flip and stitch. So let's bring you, I'll go through the pattern with you, but I've got the pieces. Let's go back under our main camera, or our secondary camera here. So we've got 1 square here. It's going to be, it basically makes the background. It makes this part right here, so that you're not seeing anything else but that lovely heart and that lovely friendship star. Then we've made a friendship star. Now, normally this is a 9-patch block, and normally you would make 4 little squares, or 5 technically, and 4 little half square triangles. But if you go to sew all those small blocks together, you're going to have a lot of bulk in the back. And look at our piece here. We only have 2 seams in the back here. And that's because you're going to create this star in the files that you get, the digital files, you're creating, this is row A and row C. It's the exact same row. You make it exactly the same way. And then when you flip it around, it makes the bottom row. So these are the same. So you're making those 2 rows, and then you're making this row, which is slightly different because it has your square in the center. And so by making them as rows instead of individual little blocks, we're taking a lot of the bulk out of our overall block. And that's important, especially when we're working with smaller pieces. So those things, kind of your typical, except we're making that friendship star with 3 rows rather than 9 individual pieces. But here is the piece that is going to give you that rounded heart shape. I call this the lobe, right? See how it is there? See how it is there? This piece, kind of like this piece here, helps you to define a curve in here because we've put 2 flippy corners on it. It's not 2 half square triangles come together. That wouldn't create that shape because you need this lobe defect here. You need this to come down a little bit here. And that's what these flippy corners do in the lobe shape. It helps give you that rounded heart shape. So if you are someone who likes more curve and more roundness in some of your quilts, segments like this will really help you with that. And so that's what we're doing this month. We're making our little Hygge friend heart block. Now, if you're part of the Quilt Lab membership, and all you have to do is click that button below to join. It's month by month. So if you want to do it some months and not other months, you just cancel whenever you want. There's a little video there. It'll kind of tell you how that all works. But on the 20th of the month, there will be a project with this block. And you're going to see even more. We're going to dive even more into the idea of shaping with this segment piece. This is a very special segment piece because it's one of the few that really can give you the idea of curve and roundness within your quilt. Now, it will look even rounder when it's sewn together. I didn't sew it together because I wanted to share with you the layout. And let's go, well, here, I can just show it to you under here. Here's our pattern. You get our coloring sheet so you can play around with color if you like. You get the cut and fabric sheet. You get the segment piece, how many of each segment you're going to make, and all these segment pieces are in the digital file folder within the pattern, and you get the layout sheet. So it takes it from the rows and the individual pieces into these 2 pieces and then your final piece. And then that is our full piece, our full heart with our friendship. And I thought, oh, and that's just, so you guys get to see some of my design work. When I create things, I write all over it, and I typically do it in black and white because I don't like color to influence how I'm going to create a shape. I always add my color at the very end. But this is a simple block to make. I think you're going to love it. If you are part of the Quilt Lab channel membership, the project we're making will be perfect for you to create something for Valentine's Day, or by using different colors, you can create one of these projects for each season of the year. So you're going to love that. That'll come out on the 20th. It will only be available for the membership folks. So if you want to be a part of that, what happens when you join the membership today? Or if you already had, and hi, all of you that have joined, thank you so very much. I appreciate it so much. Heidi and Ruth and Rose and several others. I can't think of everybody's name off the top of my head, but thank you all so much. I appreciate it more than you know. But when you create your piece, you can think about different colors. I chose that typical traditional Scandi red, white color, but you could do these in any colors you wanted. So what happens is there is going to be a post in the member only area with your coupon code so you can go download your free copy. If you're not a member and you wish to do our Hygge Heart, you can go to our website. I'll give you that information in a minute, and you can purchase just the pattern, but you won't get the projects or any of the other benefits of membership. And trust me, you'll want, the membership is less than buying the pattern. So take advantage of that and join us in the Quilt Lab membership. So this finishes up at 8 by 8 inches. So this particular, the entire block, when it's put together, finishes up at 8 inches. Now, let's go and share with you how you can get a hold of it. If you have questions, any questions, I really highly suggest you leave them in the comments, because other people will have them too. And that way everyone can see the answer to their question. Because trust me, if one of you has that question, probably a couple hundred of you have that question. So support@sewincommon.com, and I'll answer you as soon as I can. But typically right away, unless it's late at night and I'm sleeping, and depending on where you are in the world, it could be nighttime for me. And then to get your pattern, you'll need to go to www.mybuildaquilt.com. Quilt Lab members, there we go. I lost my camera for a second. I think I jiggled something. Your post with your coupon code is in the member area, so go check that out. So you can go over to the website and download your piece. But you can get that, you can get the pattern at the website. Okay. Now, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this skill building session this month about shaping our pieces and how we think about just the 6 most basic pieces, and then how we can see how different pieces, hang on, something popped up about wanting to access my stuff. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, all right, we're still going. Sorry, guys, something weird popped up on my screen. But how specialty pieces like this lobe will allow you to create lots of other shape and really guide the formation of your quilt. Another one that is defined that way, if you see that flower up there, this is another one that has a very similar idea to it. This one right here, shaped very differently. That star is another 8-point star, but it's shaped differently because we use a completely different type of segment unit. Okay. So, and that's the fun about quilting, is doing different things, making things look different, designing things for ourselves or for those that we want to give our quilts to. All right, everybody. If I showed you how to get a hold of me, I want to thank you for joining us today. Again, if you want to know more about membership, click the join button below this video, and you'll be able to see the little video before you proceed to sign up if you'd like to. I'd love to have you with us in the membership area, and trust me, you'll get a lot more benefit from, rather than just buying the pattern as a single, and you can cancel anytime you want. All right, everybody. You know what I always say, quilters are artists. We make the world a much better, loving, and beautiful place every time we put a quilt out into it. So until next time, everybody, go quilt life beautiful, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Okay, so here we are at the machine, and we're going to be doing the square. Now, you're going to say, I know, why would we just stitch one piece down on the stabilizer and when we could just cut it and sew it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Part of the technique of piecing in the hoop is to give quilters who have never quilted and pieced before some guidelines to help them with final sewing, and to give all of us the ability to sew our quilt together without having to have a 1/4 inch foot on our sewing machine,
without having to worry about accuracy when we're doing that, but even though we're not worrying about accuracy because all of our seam lines and things are built in, it's actually helping us to be more consistent. And consistency in our quilting is what makes our quilts really so beautiful. You know, I like to say about quilting, you can do anything you want in quilting, and don't let someone scream at you if you have like one little point that isn't exact. Perfect is the killer of joy in quilting, I think. I don't recommend you ever trying to be perfect. But what this does is helps you to be consistent so that you get everything just as it should be and your project will come together nicely. But you won't have to worry about, oh, is my quarter inch a good quarter inch, a scant quarter inch? I've been quilting for over 50 years, and this really is going to help you with all that consistency without having to worry about it. And it gives you another thing as well. It gives you a final box so that you have that stitch guide when you go to stitch your squares together. So I'll show you more of that when we do our trimming. So here we are, we're all set up for our stitch out again. Now the square really only has two pieces. We're going to do our border just like we've done before. I've done everything on this wash away stabilizer, and I will admit this one is by far the easiest and fastest. In fact, according to my machine here, at 700 stitches a minute, this is all stitched out in a minute or less, so pretty quick. Now let's speak about speed for a little bit. I always recommend that you don't piece above 700 stitches per minute. You can do your embroidery that way and all, but quilting is not about speed. And whenever we go and start to worry about speed, high speeds, that's when we end up with more mistakes, even in this process. So I say don't go above 700 stitches a minute on your machine speed. If your machine doesn't even go that high, good. That's good. Usually I do 600 to 700 stitches a minute on my machine. I put my little bit of glue there. Now I'm going to lay my square of fabric down, and I can kind of feel where my border is. Okay, it's not exactly even on all sides, but it doesn't matter. I have plenty of fabric there for trimming. Now, my second and my last piece, because I don't really have to do that basting or that stitched out border again because it's really doing it for me now. I am just going to stitch this down. This is my final stitch step for doing my square. So now all of my squares are going to be exactly the same size. That's the consistency thing, not only with your seams, but when you cut. A lot of times, oh, we think we cut everything right. And if you've been a quilter in more traditional ways, you know what I mean when I say squaring up a square. You never have to square up when you piece in the hoop. It's really nice not to have to do that. So this one is done just like that. So our square is finished. Now we're going to go over under my other camera and we're going to talk about trimming these out, and then we'll be ready for our last little bit of our talk here on our how-to video for Build a Quilt in the Hoop Block Basics Set 1.
All right, everybody, here we are at the machine, and we're doing the lobed heart segment of the block. I've already stitched out step 1 onto my stabilizer, and now I'm going to stitch out step 2 right on the stabilizer. That's going to give me the area that I know to cover with my fabric. And you can get both of them that you need for the mini quilt, right in one 5x7 hooping. Just move one all the way up to the top and one all the way down to the bottom, and they'll fit there just fine. Okay, now I'm going to lay my fabric over that area with the fabric right side up. All first fabrics with Build a Quilt always get laid down right side up.
and then everything else gets laid down right sides together or wrong side up. Alrighty, let's go ahead and stitch this down, and then we will have just a little bit of trimming to do on those corners. So I'll show you that. There we go. Now this is stitched down. Now I'm going to hope that we can see this. I'm going to pull this out just a wee bit. I guess you can't. Okay, so on this side, if I pull that corner back, there's the corner that I'll put my next fabric on. So I need to trim 1/4 inch right here, or roughly 1/4 inch right there. And then I need to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to take my hoop out, and I'm going to cut. It's easier, so I'm sorry about that. I do not have an assistant helping me film today, so I'm trying to do this on my own. I do apologize. But you all have done this enough that you know exactly how to work with Build a Quilt when you get those flippy corners. See, I just cut roughly at 1/4 inch past the line, and now I'll place my next fabric. My next fabric gets placed right here, right side down. Now, since it is a solid, it probably does not really matter, but if it were a print, especially, your print would face the other print, so right sides together or wrong side down. Now we're going to stitch that down. Now we're going to flip this corner over and stitch it into place. I'm just going to roll that over, give it a little finger press, and we're going to stitch that down. Just keep your fingers away from the needle. You can hold it with a stiletto if you like, or just tape it into place if you like. I just typically hold it down, or as always, you can use a little bit of fabric glue and that'll hold it down nicely. Okay, now we're on the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing because we already trimmed that corner off when we did the trimming. Okay, now we're going to flip this one and stitch it down. Do a little finger press. Now you could have put a little fabric, a dab of fabric glue back there. Go, and we'll stitch this down, and then we will do the stitch around the whole piece to connect everything and to give us our seaming line, and we will be done with the heart lobe, or the lobe of the heart in our Hygge heart. Alright, so I'm going to place a couple of pieces of tape because I have a couple of corners here which could cause some problems. Always place your tape outside the seam line so you're not digging tape out of the seam and ripping your stitches. I don't have to worry about that one because it's going to move in that direction, so I'm okay. Sorry if my voice is a little rough. It seems like it's been a little husky today. And then I'm going to place this one right over here because I don't need it there either. I don't know if I'm getting a cold. I don't feel like it, but could just be a little bit of allergy or something going on. So now we're doing the last stitch around the entire piece. And that will be the lobe of the heart for our Hygge hearts. And there we are, all done. We got both of them in one 5x7 hooping. So this total piece took 4 hoopings. One for the 2 lobes of the heart, one for the 2 color A's and 1 for the 2 color B squares, and then 1 for the 3-inch square in the color C. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, friends, we're here at the machine, and I'm showing you how to make the triple block A and C. They're made exactly the same way. One is the top row for the friendship star, and one is the bottom row. So all you do is rotate it. You don't do anything on the machine. You make them exactly the same way, and then when you place them in the block to stitch them, they come out correct. So A and C start out with a little bitty square here. And so what I've done is I'm using black thread so that you can see it. And then the second part of this is also stitched directly on the machine, or on the stabilizer. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do is, since the center of this 3-block piece is a half square triangle, we are going to lay down our piece of white fabric. This is fabric B, and we will stitch that down. Now we're going to take fabric A, which in this case is our red, and we're going to lay it right sides together, so facing down, the print facing down, right on top of the white, and we'll stitch it in place. Starts to move, just slide it back. I should have held that a little bit better, but that's okay. Now we are going to flip this over, and we're going to give it a little finger press for the seam. Now it's probably going to be a good idea for you to put a wee bit of glue stick there. Gosh, I couldn't come up with the word. My brain is just not working. So it's probably best if you put a little bit of glue stick there, because this is going to be a little tight. I don't want you hurting yourself. I am going to hold it at the point right here while it is stitching the red fabric down. And because this fabric is cut so you have just enough, you're not going to need to trim. Normally I give you a lot of fabric and you can trim. I didn't do that here. There's still plenty, but I didn't want you to have to do a lot of trimming. Now the next part is going to be our square, our first square, which is going to be here. So we're going to take our first square in red, and we're going to lay it right on top, right side down, on top of the half square triangle, and we're going to stitch it down. And you can fit both of these, the two that you need to make, the A and the C, right in one hooping in your 5x7 hoop with no problems at all. Then you're going to flip that, and we're going to stitch this right down. Again, you can always use a little bit of glue stick there if you want. Now we've done this side. Now it's going to bring us over, and we're going to do the second square, which is over here, which is another piece of our red. We're going to lay it right sides together, or print side down once more, and we're going to stitch this down. Now you should technically be using a light pearl gray. I've given you the information for this thread in the downloaded material. You can always use what you want, but I find especially when we're working with smaller pieces, this wonderful bob 80 weight works perfectly, and it's plenty strong. And if you're wondering why we're doing these in strips, these 3 pieces for the friendship star in strips, it's because you're not going to have to sew things together here and get a lot more bulky seams in this piece. This is going to help remove those seams. Now we're going to stitch this down. And then the very last thing we do is stitch all the way around this piece, and we're going to put a little bit of tape in our areas where our foot might get caught. So I'm okay here because my foot's going this way, but right here I wouldn't want that to get caught. So I'm placing a piece of my tape outside of the seam line. Never place it over the seam, like I've said before, but for those of you that are new, the pro tip is always to place it outside the seam line. That way you're not accidentally ripping things out, or you're not trying to dig tape out, because no matter how clean it comes out, you always get little pieces of tape under there if you lay it across. And then on this one, it's going to be going that way, so I don't really need any tape there, but again, right there, that little flippy piece could cause some problems, so we're going to put a wee piece of tape there. And now we're going to do the final stitch around, and this segment A/C piece will be completed. We will make another one exactly like this for the other half. So this is A, the other one is C, but you make them exactly the same. You don't flip it or do anything, because when you rotate this whole piece around 180 degrees when you're stitching your piece together, this half square triangle will line up perfectly. Okay, so that is our part AC piece. The next video is going to be the part B piece, and it's done just slightly differently. So let's move on to that. Okay, friends, here we are. We're doing row B of the friendship star in our block. The very first thing we do is we're going to stitch out the boundary box right onto our stabilizer. I'm using black thread so that you can see it a little bit better, but as always, a nice pearl gray. In fact, this information is in the downloaded materials. It's Wonderful Bob 80 weight. It's perfect, especially when we're dealing with these smaller pieces. It really gets bulk out of seams and all that. And that's, again, I know I told you this in the AC section video, but that's why we're doing these this star in 3 rows that are already interconnected. The 3 pieces in each row are interconnected, because you're not going to have to sew in thicker seams on these small blocks. It's really going to help you control that bulk. All right, so the next part, we've done this, is we are going to start on this left side, and we are going to stitch down right on the stabilizer again the piece that is going to be our left hand side half square triangle. So the very first thing we're going to do is we are going to lay our rectangle of white fabric so that some of it comes over that center line, just like that, and we are going to stitch that down, stitch it in place. You can use, again, you can use your fabric glue stick if you like. Perfect. Now we are going to lay our red piece right here, right sides down, and we're going to stitch that into place. Again, you might want to hold it a little bit so that it doesn't, the smaller pieces want to sometimes move around on you. But keep your fingers away from the needle, please. Okay, now we're going to flip this. And again, as with the other one, I didn't give you a lot of overage so that you're not going to have to do a lot of trimming. It's going to be ready to trim right out of the stabilizer. We're going to stitch this into place. There we go. Now, the next piece we're going to do is the center square. That's a white piece of fabric. We're going to lay it right on top, and this would be right side down, but since it's a solid, it doesn't really matter. But if it were a print, it would be right side down. We're going to lay it right on top of our previous half square triangle in the row and stitch it down. And now we're going to flip it into place. We're going to give it a little finger press right here. You could always use a fabric roller, a seam roller. That works really well too. Sometimes I do that, especially if I'm dealing with a bigger piece. Sometimes I even use my screwdriver for my hoops and kind of roll that if I really want to get a seam flat. It works really well. I don't know, this is a screwdriver that works on my brother and my baby lock machines, but I'm not sure. The last time I ordered one, they sent me one that didn't work. It wasn't the right size, so I'm not sure if they make that one anymore. But it's my favorite screwdriver. The screwdriver is actually inset into that piece, so it fits over the knobs of your hoops really nicely. All right, now this piece, there's a little extra fabric right here, so you could trim it if you wanted to. I'm technically not going to worry about it. It's white, it's not really going to add too much bulk, and I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so this next piece is going to be the white, and how I'm going to lay this down, it wants to turn out to be like that. It's the top of our half square triangle. So what I'm going to do is lay it the way it should be, and then I'm just going to take and flip it over. That is always the easiest way to figure out where to put your triangles. Now, I don't want to lay it even. Since I didn't trim, I don't want to lay it even with that. I wouldn't have enough fabric. So I'm just making sure that I've got it laid down a little bit beyond that stitch line. If you trim it, of course, you would lay it exactly the same way. Stitch that into place. Easy peasy, right? So many of you are just experts at this now, but we have so many fun new folks with us that I apologize if it's old hat to some of you, but I just want to make sure everybody understands. Now I'm going to flip this, and I'm just holding it in place with my finger right here until it starts to move around. There we go. And there's that. And then I'm going to lay my red piece right on top. Right like that, right side down, just like we did with all of our other ones. And we are going to make sure got that in place. Very good. And if you always want to kind of double check that you've left enough for a seam, when you put your foot down, you can kind of see how far away the center of that is, or even lower your needle, and you'll make sure that you have enough space there. Now we're going to stitch this down. Perfect. And now we will flip it over and stitch it into place, and we will have our row B. We'll have to do our outside edges, the outside stitch around like we always do. Now I think, oh yeah, what I've done here is I've actually had mine in the wrong spot right there. I am going to snip that seam just a stitch. I don't recommend this. I recommend you pull this out and redo it, but I don't want to have to redo this in this video for you. So I'm just pulling it down a little bit. It'll be fine in the end because I will remake this for my own. I didn't pull my, put my fabric up too far there. That's why I always give you guys, oh, it got it all, so that's good. That's why I always give you guys plenty of fabric. And I think since I'm making this video, I will go back and I will give you slightly larger pieces for these. That might help you out a little bit. Now we're going to lay out some of our tape. We need tape here, we need tape here. I'm going to put it on the outside. Just pulling my tape off. Come on, tape. There we go. And I'll put it there. And I don't need any on that side until I get to that corner. And then I'm going to need a wee bit right there on that corner as well. Okay, and now we're going to stitch that around. And there we go. We have our B part created. So this is the center row of our friendship star, which is part of our Hygge heart. And we've already done the A and B sections, which will go on top and bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.